we are experiencing a housing crisis in this country. And so that very quickly, if you listen to some of the narratives in mainstream media, turns into a discussion around immigration and multiculturalism. And that is a very dangerous place for us to be. And so this work, I think, is doubly important at this point in time. So I commend the organisations in this room, and there are many of you and many familiar faces, who provide that bridge into the mainstream, where in the mainstream, and I think about my experience with Centrelink when I was a student, even having English as your first language that you grew up with, is an extremely challenging environment. And perhaps if you were to be I suppose, cynical about some of the neoliberal policies that we have been subjected to over a very long period of time, that's perhaps a deliberate structure that has been put in place. It is hard to get help. And so I remember standing in Footscray Centrelink, feeling this enormous empathy for the people around me who were just trying to get access to the basic services that they were entitled to. And it's enormously challenging. So the organisations that are here that provide that crucial work, your work is powerful, and in government we see it and we value it, even though I take on board that the funding cycles are often extremely challenging to work within. But I'd like to share an example with you of where I feel those bridges between service provision, I've seen the power of them, and that is through our early childhood reforms, so the delivery of free kinder in Victoria. Now, we have a very high take-up of kinder. We know that those early years are so crucial to a person's development. And the kinder reforms are also a very big economic reform. You know, it helps women in particular return to the workforce as we transition to a 30-hour pre-prep week. But one thing we noticed, and we knew very early on as a government, that there was a huge gap with newly arrived communities and children who were not accessing any kinder, and they were arriving at school missing that enormous development opportunity and already starting behind in life. So we employed, I think it was 40 bicultural workers, and they are connected to local government, so they're employed within local government, but they're also connected to housing providers because that's how they get into the accommodation. It might be down at the flats in Fitzroy, and they're connected to maternal child health nurses, and all of a sudden you can see a connection in language that, the outcome at the end of this is a family, a mother that is better connected to her community, perhaps seeing a maternal child health nurse for the first time, but you see a child that is also accessing kinder and being able to build their own community and have their own development nurtured. And so that work, that bridge from a very specific cultural connection through to mainstream services literally changes this child's life. But there's also an economic benefit for us, of course, because in this huge reform, we are not leaving young people from different backgrounds or their parents behind in that great opportunity of free kinder. And I remember being out in, I think I was in Ardea, and I was at a kindergarten, and I met one of these bicultural workers. and she was employed by Brimbank Council, funded by the Victorian government, and she told me that she had connected with 50 children. She had gotten 50 children in that past year into kindergarten, and I just think that that's a remarkable achievement. One of the bicultural workers I met was working with Brotherhood of St Lawrence in the public housing flats. And so all of those connections in a system that is so challenging to navigate is incredibly important. But what you have delivered in this lengthy and detailed research with your extensive interviews, you've created a policy template, a toolkit for your organisations in your budget advocacy, but it provides government with some real food for thought.